Good afternoon. We have another special visitor and guest with us here today. The January jobs report, which we all saw came out this morning, is disappointing and underscores the need to act swiftly to deliver immediate relief to American families. The bottom line is our economy is digging out of a hole worse than the depths of the Great Recession moving at a crawling pace. Today we're joined by a member of the Council of Economic Advisors, Bernstein, who will walk through the numbers reported today by the Department of Labor and how they serve to underline the urgency for the President's rescue plan. Go ahead, Jared.
Thanks so much to Jen and the team for helping me be here today. This morning's employment report revealed a stall in the American job creation machine and underscores how precarious a situation our economy is in. The lack of job growth is a result of our failure to act appropriately in response to this immense dual crisis, and our economy and our families can't afford for us to fail to act once again. Strong relief is urgently and quickly needed to control the virus, get vaccine shots in arms, and finally launch a robust, equitable, and racially inclusive recovery. Getting to the numbers of the report, the economy added 49,000 jobs in January after losing 227,000 jobs in December. The three-month trend, I find it useful to smooth out these monthly numbers over a few months, and the three-month trend is a weak 29,000 jobs per month. Downward revisions to the data in November and December totaled 160,000, so those are negative revisions to those months' earlier reports. And the economy, as I mentioned, has averaged 29,000 jobs over the past 3 months. Now, if you compare that to the trend over the prior 3 months, that trend was closer to 1 million. So you see a really very significant downshift in the pace of job creation. This pace is far below the rate necessary to pull us out of the pandemic jobs deficit. There are about 10 million fewer jobs now relative to February. The unemployment rate fell to 6.3%, which still remains almost 3 points above the rate in February 2020 of 3.5% before the pandemic. Over the same period, more than 4 million workers have dropped out of the labor force. If you drop out of the labor force, you're not counted in the unemployment rate. And those dropouts have been disproportionately women. It's clear that there's a need for urgent and sustained action for the duration of this crisis. In January, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics today, just under 15 million people reported they were, quote, unable to work because their employer closed or lost business due to the pandemic. This number has been about the same since October after falling in the wake of the implementation of the CARES Act from May to September. Long-term unemployment has risen. This is a great concern of the administration, reflecting the duration of the economic crisis and the fact that the virus was unconstrained during most of last year. Almost 40% of the unemployed in January had been so for half a year, 27 weeks or more. This 40%, that's an elevated rate, and it represents a shift from temporary layoffs to permanent unemployment. Workers of color have been more likely to lose their jobs than white workers. In January, the unemployment rate for black workers was 9.2% and was 8.6% for Hispanic workers compared to 5.7% for whites and 6.6% for Asian workers. While the unemployment rate for men and women is relatively similar, women have left the labor force in numbers that are of great concern to us. The employment rate among what we call prime age workers, women 25 to 54, is down 4 percentage points, 2.6 million women since February. This larger decrease for women is unusual in recessions and likely reflects both the industries that this pandemic has hit, tourism, services, face-to-face industries, leisure and hospitality, restaurants, and increased care responsibilities that have been pulling women out of the labor force. Certain industries have been especially hard hit. As I mentioned, the unemployment rate for leisure and hospitality workers is around 16%. The elevation in long-term unemployment is especially salient since benefits for these workers will expire soon without further congressional action. Today's report is yet another reminder that our economy is still climbing out of a hole deeper than that of the Great Recession and needs additional relief to ensure that the pandemic can be brought under control, that families and businesses can stay solvent and make it to the other side of this crisis, and that workers can feed their families and keep a roof over their head. With that.
All right. I'm going to be the moderator. Trevor.
Thanks for that summary. So a couple questions related to this. First, as far as the $1,400 checks, Jared, do you think that, is there any economic argument for why those shouldn't go to a broader group of people? Is there any argument for raising the threshold that you would need to qualify for that? And then I have a follow-up as well.
I think the key argument there is that there are families throughout not just the lower part of the income scale, but in the middle part of the income scale that have been suffering and doing everything they can to get through this crisis. The president has been very clear on an important point here, which is that if you look at teachers, if you look at folks who are in blue-collar professions, if you look at retail workers, healthcare workers, if those folks are unemployed, they can get unemployment coverage, and that helps them. But many of those folks have kept their jobs. Many of them are essential workers, yet they've lost hours, they've lost wages, they're struggling to make ends meet. They face nutritional constraints. Often they face foreclosure or eviction moratoria, which, by the way, forbearance, when it comes to mortgage, does not mean forgiveness. So many of these families are accumulating significant debt that will come due. Now, in terms of the parameters, you've asked about this. Let's do just a little bit of wonky policy analysis, if that's okay. There are three parameters in play here when we're talking about the checks. There's the thresholds, where they come in. There's the level. The president has been firm on 1,400 as a level, which, plus the 600 gets you to 2,000. And then there's the phase out. And it's the phase out range that is that I would say is a variable under discussion in negotiations that are ongoing. There hasn't been a conclusion, but as the president has said, he is open to that discussion.
But just as far as what is the economic argument for changing those phase-out numbers? Why shouldn't you just go with what you originally proposed?
I think the argument is one that we've heard consistently from some critics, which say that those at the very top of the scale, when you get into the realm of $300,000, I think has been mentioned. I think it's arguable that those folks don't need the checks. I think what's important to the president is that we don't lose sight of people in the middle of the income scale who continue to struggle with both the health and economic fallout from this crisis. And these checks target them effectively and efficiently. By the way, this is an important thing that comes from some work by the group ITEP, Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy. If you look at the distribution, who gets the checks, it actually, virtually none of it goes to the very top of the scale, and the vast majority goes to the middle and the bottom. Their percentage gains in income from the checks are double digits compared to those at the top of the scale. So I think that we have to understand that targeting in this case means reaching families at the low end, at the middle end, families who have been hit and are struggling with this crisis.
Okay, super quick follow-up. Just one more. Do you think that just beyond this bill, that there needs to be more reform around automatic stabilizers, unemployment insurance? Do you need to do more so that the next time we hit something like this, we have a solution?
The president has on occasion talked about this point and said that if our automatic stabilizers are keyed to economic indicators or health indicators, that is a potentially useful policy advance. I know that Treasury Secretary Yellen has talked about that as well. Right now, we're kind of past the stage of thinking about, right now, we're really at a point where we have a package that is calibrated to meet the urgency of the moment. And that's the American Rescue Plan. So that's what we want to focus on. There are all kinds of interesting policy discussions we could and should have, and I think that's one of them. But for now, what we need to do is get this package out there and meet the urgency of the moment.
Thank you, and thanks for being here. I want to ask you about some of the criticism by one of your former colleagues, Larry Summers, of course, former top economic advisor to former President Barack Obama, former Treasury Secretary. He has acknowledged the bailout in 2009, by his own admission, he says, didn't go far enough. But he says that this $1.9 trillion proposal is so big that it risks progressive priorities in the future and could potentially undermine the economy next year. Is the Biden administration going too big?
No, I firmly would disagree with that contention. By the way, I wouldn't call the other thing a bailout. That was the Recovery Act, and I think that also was an effective measure. But I think that the idea now is that we have to hit back hard, we have to hit back strong if we're going to finally put this dual crisis of the pandemic and the economic pain that it has engendered behind us. With respect to Larry's point, I mean, one thing is just wrong, which is that our team is dismissive of inflationary risks. We've constantly argued that the risks of doing too little are far greater than the risk of going big, providing families and businesses with the relief they need to finally put this virus behind us. Second, I want to quote Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who strongly reiterated this view the other day, I think it was just a week or so ago, that inflationary risks are also asymmetric right now. When asked about this precise trade-off that you're asking me about, he said, and I'm quoting, "I'm much more worried about falling short of a complete recovery and losing people's careers and lives that they built because they don't get back to work in time. I'm more concerned about the damage that will do, not just to their lives, but to the United States economy, to the productive capacity of the economy. I'm more concerned about that than about the possibility which exists of higher inflation." So this is risk management. This is balancing risks. And in our view, the risks of doing too little are far greater than the risks of doing too much.
And just one more question. The Senate moved forward with a measure that did not include an increase in the minimum wage. Has President Biden come to a determination that that's not going to be a part of the final package in order to get this passed, in order to get the Democratic support that he needs?
The president has consistently argued that a minimum wage, $15 an hour, is essential to make sure that people, many of whom, millions of whom are essential workers, are not toiling at a minimum wage of $7.25 per hour, which is the federal minimum wage. This idea that somehow, and I've heard this in many questions, this idea that the minimum wage is somehow orthogonal to this package makes no sense to me, because it is an efficient and effective way to raise the pay of people who are in the bottom end of this workforce, essential workers in retail trade, in healthcare, in sanitation, people who are keeping this economy going, but consistently undercompensated for it.
Will it be a part of the final package?
I'm not going to negotiate that from the podium, as they say. Wait,
Very good.
I have one other point I want to make, though. Getting back to the argument with Larry. This is key from my perspective as an economist who, throughout my career, has been motivated and concerned. I think the theme of my work has always been making sure that this economy, that our economy, the American economy, provides ample opportunities for people from all walks of life, from all parts of the income scale, men and women, persons of color, communities of color, have the opportunities they need to realize their potential. And right now, there is deep unused capacity in this economy, which is targeted by the American Rescue Plan. There are 10 million unemployed people. There are 2.5 fewer women in the labor force than last year. As I mentioned, Black and Hispanic unemployment rates are 9%. We've got a job market in stall. The risk is a deflationary risk, which motivates us to go home or to go big or to go home. And the costs of inaction, of not addressing these risks, are too steep and too costly to these vulnerable groups relative to the likelihood of overheating. That's the way I think about it.
Thank you. Just one more follow-up from the other Kristen. Is the White House's economic team, is there anyone on the team that is concerned that the $1.9 trillion is too big, is too much, or is everybody in agreement?
The White House economic team is in complete consensus on the urgency of the need for this American Rescue Plan, and in complete solidarity on the calibration of this plan, that it's of the magnitude to meet the challenges we face. Again, with respect to Larry and his piece, it's just flat out wrong that our team is, quote, dismissive of inflationary risks. Janet Yellen is our Treasury Secretary, okay? She knows a little something about inflationary risks and has tracked that kind of, has tracked that economic issue forever. I just quoted from Jerome Powell, whose job is to manage that risk against the risk of slack in the job market, against the risk of persistent unemployment, against the risk of people getting stuck in joblessness so they can't get back out and get back into the job market, against the risk of scarring in the economy, meaning not doing enough about current damages so that they become permanent damages and people can't get back into the labor market. And businesses that should and would be viable on the other side of this crisis fail because we haven't taken the steps to get them through to the other side of the crisis. So the team has all of our oars in the water pulling in exactly the same direction on that.
Mary, I'm going to have to be the last question.
One other question on Larry Summers' criticism, not to belabor this point, but he also raises some questions about your future agenda. He notes that you will have committed 15% of GDP with this bill with basically no increase in public investments. Is this a concern going forward? Where will you find the money to build back better as the president has promised?
I think the way President Biden talks about this is not just resonant, but is also follows an economic logic that I think is very strong. Rescue, recovery. The rescue plan, the American Rescue Plan, gets this economy and the families and the businesses in it to the other side of this crisis by finally controlling the virus, producing, distributing the vaccine, and giving people the relief they need to get to the other side. But simply getting back to where we were is a bar that's far too low for the Biden-Harris administration. And that's where Building Back Better and the recovery plan comes in. These are structural changes, by the way, many of which, as the president has said, permanent programs should be paid for. So these are structural programs that, not in a cyclical sense, dealing with kind of getting to the other side of the crisis, but deal with the structural challenges we face in climate, in education, in care, in poverty, in racial discrimination. And and infrastructure. I am wholly confident in this president and this administration's ability to go forth and make a strong case for rescue now, get the economy the other side of the crisis, pursue the recovery, the Building Back Better agenda. As I say, I'm confident about that. One point and then I'll stop. Infrastructure, I get asked about this a lot. And the implication kind of the question is that, well, infrastructure is a Democrat thing and you'll have a hard time with that. Let me tell you a little anecdote. I was testifying sometime a year or two ago in the House. And when I finished my testimony, a couple of Republicans, and I won't name them because this was a private moment, pulled me aside and said, hey, Democrat, come here. And they said, we want to do infrastructure, but we can't do it because our boss, President Trump, doesn't have a plan. The plan was really an asterisk. I guarantee you, there are politicians on both sides of the aisle who are champing at the bit to make investments in public goods in this country, to do an infrastructure bill that repairs not just maintenance, but gets into clean energy, into broadband, into the kinds of investments that you've heard the president talk about. So I am confident that we work on rescue now. We'll get to recovery next.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.